On today's episode of WatchJRGo, we are back in the shop, and today we're bringing back the ghost of an old project. That's right, my Jag F-Type S. What is going on, guys? I'm WatchJRGo, and today, like I said, we are cleaning up the shop, and there's a project that's been sitting outside for a very long time. And that project is the engine from my 2017 Jag. It might have been a 14, somewhere in that range there, F-Type S. So the beautiful, beautiful car that was a lot of fun after we put a new engine in it. This one I kept so we could tear it down eventually, and that was at the old building. Guess what? It's still here and it still needs torn down. So today we're gonna tear this thing down and see what the carnage looks like. And I made it even worse because I let it sit outside. So let's get the forklift out, get this thing out of here so it can stop sitting in front of the shop, and start tearing this down to see just what happened to kill my Jag. If you guys remember that thing, this thing started, but it was the biggest smoke and coolant cloud you've ever seen in your life. And I think it was only running on a handful of cylinders. So it's only got 6. If you take too many away, it sure is in trouble. Let's tear this 3-liter supercharged engine down. So I hopped on the old trusty forklift, brought it back to life. This thing doesn't move that often anymore now that we're not moving pallets all the time in the shop, but picked up the Jag engine, and this forklift's alarm never shuts off while you're driving it, so I figured you guys would rather listen to anything but a constant beep while we move this thing inside. And 20 minutes of messing around with the forklift, and we got this thing spun around, lifted up, and set on the engine stand so we can finally tear down the 2017, I think again, Ford Jag AJ 3-liter. And of course, supercharged, but the supercharger's missing, and all the accessories have been taken off and they were put back on the car, obviously. So this one is semi-dressed. It's got a bunch of the belt tensioners and crank pulley, stuff like that, but it doesn't have alternator, AC compressor, all that fun stuff that tucks in here. So we have knocked a little bit of time off tearing this thing down, but let's take a quick look at this engine. So this thing is an absolute monster. It makes a ton of power, and I think it's the 306 PS right there. This one was turned up. It did have a tune on it, and a smaller supercharger pulley and a few other things. And then of course you can see every single part on the engine is supplied by Ford, Fomoco, the scripty nice Fomoco, and then the Jag Land Rover logos on the head there. I love pointing this out because the Jag people freak out. They're like, I don't have a Ford engine, when, like, let's be honest, you do. Ford designed you this engine and supplied everything for it. So it's really no big deal too. Ford makes a great product. In fact, the reason they're somewhat reliable even is probably because they're a Ford product. But with that said, and everybody rushing to the comments to throw a fit already, I can hear it now. Let's jump into this thing. So we're gonna start by tearing off the valve covers here and then getting down through the cylinder heads. And basically we're just gonna rip every single thing off this engine with the big impact until we get it all the way down, and I can start throwing stuff into the scrap trailer here. Jag Land Rover logos on the little cylinder hush mats, which is what these are if you've never seen them. Once everything's put together, I think this one goes on this side here. These, honestly I forget how they go, but these sit on top of the head and make everything super quiet. They're just big sound dampening mats, and they work really, really well. You cannot believe how great those mats are. This one's over here because it's got the oil fill on it. So I had them flipped, but that is the cylinder mats right there. Here are the plugs that came out, even though they're nasty now. They had a ton of Corona stain and GK plugs though, and you could tell that this thing had been running on them for a very long time. Intake gaskets right here, And of course the supercharger is gone. Like I said, we'll talk more about that at the end. I can't wait to show you the updates on the supercharger. These little clips right here sit on top of the DI injectors and press them down in. They're kind of like hold down clamps for the injectors. And the injectors have already been pulled out and the spark plugs are out, as you saw. Obviously the spark plugs are sitting right there. And the injectors that were in this engine moved over to my new engine, because we didn't know if they had been resized or not for the tune. Well, let's bust into the old AJ here. We got the Castrol recommended 5 dub 20 cap. It's a little beat by the sun now, so we won't be keeping anything off of this engine at this point because it spent too much time outside. Can you guys believe we have a stripped fastener on this thing? I can't. When's the last time you saw a valve cover bolt rust to the point where it's stripped out? I'm gonna have to put a little remover on this thing and see what we can get done, but yeah, the socket's spinning on that bolt. All of these are rusted out that badly. And you know what? It doesn't look like the weather did this, because everywhere else the weather didn't hurt anything. I think the supercharger did this. Let's beat on that a little bit more, because we probably only have one shot. All 4 bolts that sit under the supercharger here, this one, this one, this one, this one, have severe rust on them. Came right out. Let's do the same thing. Make sure we don't find ourselves in a quandary. Wow, that one had no head left at all. All right, let's see. What are these bad boys? This is the 3/8 little remover, easy out kind of thing. I forgot what brand these are. I'd link them, but turns out they work great. Actually, they actually work terribly. I should put a caveat there. This is the only time it's ever gotten the job done. Time to see under the valve covers. Gaskets sure don't want to let. Well, the cam gave up in the weather, that's for sure. How? Where did this come from? I mean, sure, the spark plug hole and the DI holes were open, but that hardly makes sense when the exhaust cams look great. Not perfect, but good. And the intake cams look like barnacles have been growing on them for quite a while there. Pretty wild. But those are some nasty cams if I've ever seen them. I kind of want to crush the growth. Maybe give it a turn over and see if they clean up. We should do that. What do we need on the crank pulley? 1 inch. 1 inch on the crank pulley. And we'll bust out our trusty breaker bar. That's what this is. It's an adjustable breaker bar. And give it a turn over. It might not even turn over. Oop, oop. It's locked up tight. The engine won't move. Shouldn't have been that bad. Come on, guys. How on earth would it have been that bad? We just take this bad boy, put the forklift on the end of it and lift it up. The forklift trick would be fun, but I don't think this engine's gonna move no matter what we do. So let's just rip it apart. Tensioner test. I'm gonna say that needed a bearing. Could have been the weather, but I think it needs a bearing. Ford Jag, look at that. LBEXA 2013. Okay, so this might be a 14 engine because this tensioner was 722 of 13. It looks like we gotta pull the DI line set over here before we can get to the tins that hold the rest of this valve cover on. You do have to undress all the fuel injection before you can make any real progress on this block here. So about 1 million bolts in the way. Getting all those out right now. And over here on the passenger side of the engine, even the engine mount has to come off before you can get to the fuel lines. So you really have to unbake the entire cake before you can get in here and get the valve covers off. You can squeeze the valve cover around this line, but let's just get it all off. No forged stamping on the engine mount, but these are nice. Cast aluminum. We gotta pull this cute little cover right here. Oh, I was in the wrong gear. That thing is aggressive. Look how thick that is. It also weighs quite a bit, like it weighs a dumb amount. To be precise, this is what a dumb amount is. 5 ounces? That's nearly half a pound. If you want to do some weight reduction on your AJ engine, now you know, pull that little cover right there that shields the DI feed line. Don't do that, obviously. But pretty crazy what that weighs. We've got our DI pumps right here. There are 2 of them, and they're not sequential if I remember right. Yeah, so this is fuel in for both pumps, and then, yeah, they combined right here. So yeah, they both just kind of tie together to feed a whole lot of fuel pressure when this thing needs it. And I'm sure it can use it because it really makes a lot of power. Honestly, I think it makes way more than 306 PS, but it went, I can tell you that much. Time to crack all these fuel lines. Here's our feeds. It's always easier than you think. DI fuel lines look like they're all complicated and it's gonna be like super hard to get anything done. But then they come right off and look at that, it's still full of fresh fuel too. So that's pretty wild. So now we've got the main feed line out. And now let's get our feeds up to the fuel rails. Smells delicious. A lot of gas left in those pumps. Woo! All right, fuel lines deleted, which means, like I said, we can now finally take the valve cover off. Oh, another terrible one. This thing was under the sea, under the sea. Look at that. That cylinder is full of water. We've got a bunch of water right there. We've got a bunch of Ford logos on every inch of this engine. That's for all the haters. And then we have cams that are just barnacled up with rust, just destroyed. Cam variators looking rough. Everything looking rough. Wow. While we're in here, let's go ahead and zip off all the fun stuff. We gotta get these tensioners off of here, and we can pull the vacuum pump off, cam variator, controls, all that fun stuff. So let's rock and roll. This house has a crazy pulley arrangement, and if I remember right, maybe you don't have to unbolt this to get a belt on, but it's somewhat complicated. But here we go. Ooh, there's one behind that pulley. So you gotta pull that pulley. We're gonna try 16, and it is 16. Okay, was this pulley any good? Ooh, yeah, that bearing's nice. All right, still going in the trash, but at least it was nice. So 13 back on the bracket, and we've got the front of the engine uncovered. Let's check them all. That one's actually like brand new. Sounds toast. Now for the spring tensioner. Oh, that comes off so nice. Incredible. Is it any good? Also excellent. These things really hold up, even after all that time out in the sun. Now this idler pulley here is trash. But with that said, let's get all the electronics off of here. Should only take a couple seconds. Get there. Cam position sensors are looking a little rough. It actually looks like the valve cover was leaking, or one of the sensors right here. But these things are covered in dirt and oil. They're probably perfect though. I bet those still work. And I don't know why I'm holding all the bolts that are going in the trash here. Another cam position. Let's see if we can get these guys off of here. They'll probably need a pry bar. I wasn't expecting that to be that much work, but there you can see the little, it's like a flat servo motor here, and it can drive this pin in and out to control cam position right there. There you go. They just like, it's like a coyote basically. Ford builds one thing, Mustang engines, and then everybody gets it. Truck gets it. Maybe they build truck engines and Mustangs get it. There we go. This one's deeper, isn't it? Is it? Can these swap? Are they the same part number? It actually sounds like a solenoid and not a servo. Part numbers are unreadable. No, they're different. This ends in 6.2, the other one ends in 08. Well, if you're troubleshooting, you might be able to swap side to side, but you sure can't swap cam to cam. Another cam position sensor. And another cam position sensor. FOMOCO. If you have to take these out of your engine, at least now you know they don't come out easily. You really do have to fight each one out. But luckily, you can stick a straight bit down in there and kind of rock them out of their housing until the O-ring lets go. And shout out to them, these O-rings sealed very well. No oil leaks on any of these actually. That's right, my compliments to the chef, Ford. Let's pull some Torx fasteners. It's cam time. Cam cap. Watery oil. On the cam here, it actually looks like a milkshake, which makes sense with all the rust we've got going on. Ooh, that one's got the milkshake on the screw. Bolt. You do have to love that the cam caps on these have exhaust and intake stamped on every single one of them. Look at that oil passage on there. Wow, that's pretty cool. Both of them. Ford really did go aggressive with the oiling system. These have a hole that feeds right into this, and then of course it can carry oil all the way across the cam cap. And the cam cap is the bearing as well, which is very cool. Let's repeat that feat. Now the first bearing has 2 passages for oil in it, and then all the other ones have that diagonal passage. Kind of interesting. There's another diagonal. We're starting to see just how bad the damage was. Look at the rust underneath the cam caps here. There's more of it. Obviously, these ones were kind of stuck in place too, and the cams did release, so they'll come out now once we get the chains off. So with that said, let's start on the timing set here. Let's get all this timing stuff out. Then we'll get the oil cooler out, the heat exchanger here, and of course, you know, the thing that likes to kill these, the plastic cooling tubes. If you replace these, your engine will probably last forever in these Jags. That's the word on the street, because the AJ is a solid engine. I think it's a solid engine, and as long as it doesn't overheat, it keeps running. So unfortunately, this one did overheat and did the other thing where, you know, it stops running. So, look at all that. It's like looking inside the ocean here. Barnacles. Water again. There's more water. Woo! So we gotta get the balancer off here, which is actually very nice, but it's a gigantic Torx. T45 is what this is, and it's bigger, so it's 50. We're gonna switch to the big impact and the 50 here to get the balancer off. This is, we just did that Toyota one. This is 10 million times nicer. I mean, it better be. This car also costs like 10 million times more. These were what, like 70, 75 or something, and MR2's new. You saw the sticker on that when we opened it up. I think it was 28, fully loaded. That's like an every option MR2 except for the turbo. Wow, those things are in there. And it smells like fish. Fish are 44K on this Loctite. Okay. I was being really nice to this balancer, like I was gonna save it. What am I doing? This is going straight in the iron pile. Let's hit this thing. That was the quickest thing ever. I actually didn't know these were 2-piece, and I don't think they're supposed to be 2-piece. But maybe. Interesting. Here we go again. We got her. There's your solution to popping that balancer off. I don't recommend doing that to yours at home, but the rubber's in really good shape. You could probably still run this thing. Again, I wouldn't. I probably should have left the pulley for leverage, but. Ooh. Didn't even blink. Wow. Here we go again, heavier socket. Will it work? Okay, we're gonna take a happy little break from that, and then we'll get back to it here in a minute. I don't know what we're gonna do, beat on with the air hammer until it comes loose. But let's pull the timing covers off. Oh, so nice. This is relaxing compared to what we just went through there. Hey. A couple of these are buried. Let's delete the oil filter housing. There's got to be one more bolt. Doesn't there? I don't know, guys. There's one. These are pinned too. They've got dowels. Wow, those are so clean inside. Honestly, this engine was probably a masterpiece right up until it died. I bet it was always taken care of, just didn't have the metal coolant. Upgrade. Still doweled, still super clean inside. That engine looked brand new. It's crazy. If you guys remember, I think I paid $8,000 for the replacement for this thing. Absolute insanity. And that's just what it costs. Like, there's no two ways about it. You're stuck paying the insane fee. You know what you have to do? I think you have to pull the oil filter, and then you pull out the center section of this, and then there's a bolt. Run it! Didn't work. Are you guys kidding me? All of that work is because this bolt's reverse thread? What'd I do all that for? There it goes. Sucks back into reverse. All right. Well, now that we got there, we got this thing nice and hot. Let's keep tearing things apart. I've decided to take a break from the horror of the crank pulley that's mounted on this engine here, and I went ahead and flipped it over a little bit. Let's drain the oil down and see what's in here. So we're gonna try to just use the impact and move out of the way quickly. So here we go, 3, 2, 1. Whew! That's why she doesn't move anymore. She's got the clear oil in her. All right, we should be at real oil by now, come on. Any moment now. Any moment now. Maybe there was no oil left in this engine. I probably drained it before I pulled it. But that's a lot of water, guys. Ah, look at that. Milkshake. We got milkshake and we got a little oil. All right, that's looking better. about time to knock this drain pan off too. And take a look at the drain plug, got the milkshake on it. Woo! What a sludgy mess. Only because of the water, honestly. I bet the oil that came out of this thing was flawless. I mean, you guys can see inside the engine. It's incredibly nice. Other than the water. The water did a number on it. Well, I tried everything in the arsenal here, and it turns out the only thing that can get off the, I guess we're calling this the crank hub here, is your 3-jaw puller. So it wasn't leaking either. Nice race all the way around there from that seal. And I was thinking you might be able to pull off the timing cover here without getting this off of here, because these look like they're the same size, but you'd have to destroy the seal to do it, and it doesn't look like it's gonna come off easily. So I do think you're gonna have to find a 3-jaw puller if you're ever working on one of these. And you have to change that guy. Also a monster bolt there. But now we're ready to pull this cover off, which will let us finally get the timing set out of here, pull the cams, and then continue tearing this thing down. Also, I'm sure you noticed, there's still water and oil all over the place from the milkshake that came out of this thing. I would like to see it turn, but honestly, I don't think this thing's ever gonna turn over again. I think this is its final resting position for this engine. And now we don't have anything to turn on either, because a flywheel turning tool might do a little work, but I mean, look how much rust is on that. Also, the reluctor back here that it uses for pickup is crazy. It's gigantic. It's the size of the flywheel almost. You can see that second ring back behind it. Tone ring, reluctor ring, it's huge. The crank position sensor is supposed to go in right there, and that picks up that reluctor ring or tone ring back behind the flywheel, but it's got a little inspection hole right there. I think we use that to pull the torque converter bolts. With that said, this is a pretty well instrumented engine, and it should just be very reliable. And obviously, we've talked about this in previous videos too. This comes in 2 flavors, right? It comes in the 3-liter and it comes in the 5-liter. And in the 3-liter, they just leave that right there. You can see where the piston's even supposed to be in the block. But instead, it's just filled in, and then they have a smaller head on them for the 3-liter. And if you have the 5-liter, that hole gets punched out, it gets another bore right there with another piston, and you get 2 more cylinders tacked on to this same engine architecture. Oil level sensor right there, and there really wasn't too much to take off of here. Knock sensors in the valley, kind of like an LS, but no cam and block here. Anyway, let's keep tearing this thing down. Time to take the timing cover off, and time to pull the oil heat exchanger off. And once we're there, I think we can drop the cams, pull the heads, and see what's going on inside the cylinders. Okay, here's our vacuum pump, just got it dropped off. It has its own like little shaft that runs it here. It has an accessory shaft. Here's our crankshaft right there. And this is the vacuum pump. You can see it's got a little foam moco stamping on it there. And maybe these are balance shafts. I'm not really sure. There's a bunch of extra shafts in there. They sure look like balance shafts. There's one here, one here. That would make sense that those are balance shafts, but then this also has like a flyweight on the end of this shaft here. Not quite sure what that one's doing. We'll figure it out as we finish tearing this thing down. Vacuum pump is just a wiper with 2 seals on the end. You can see those big vertical seals that kind of seal up the whole compartment there, and this thing spins around. It shouldn't have had this much oil in it. I don't know where it's getting all this oil. I guess it's always sucking air in, so it's probably okay. But you can see the lugs right there that go into that balance shaft. That's what I assume that's what it is there. And it also has like an oiling O-ring, and it oils through the center or something like that. So very interesting, spins around wonderfully. And of course that wiper just goes into that little drive section right there. So, oh, that's kind of interesting. It looks like the way this works when it's spinning around, right? This glides in here and is moving up and down like that, because that's the only way it could work. So since it has to go in a circle and complete a rotation at the same time, right? So that's like kind of a connecting rod shaft. Very interesting. So more complex than you would expect right there. We can throw the vacuum pump away. And we can get in here to this timing set, which thank God is a 3-chain. You know Audi loves to hit us with a 4-chain. And look at all these crazy oilers. The oiling system on this thing is nuts. So there's that oil squirter right there, oil squirter right there. These are spraying directly on all of the timing drive gears off the crank. Another oil squirter right there going to the very back chain. So every chain is being oiled. There's another one right there that's going back to behind this balance shaft or whatever it is. Super wild how much oiling's on here. I assume it also has oil squirters going to the bottom of the pistons, which we'll find out shortly here. But this thing is very, very technically advanced, I would say. Maybe this engine is as reliable as everybody says it is on the internet if you change all of the cooling system fittings. Because that's this engine's downfall, of course. The plastic breaks, cracks, gets hot, engine done. And it's a very expensive engine. You can tell it's got a lot of engineering and machine work that goes into it. But the Achilles heel is that cooling system. I think just looking at this and the fact that it's a 3-chain and not a 4-chain is like complexity is relatively low while being, you know, a well-engineered package. I like what I'm seeing here. I've seen a lot worse. We tore down my R8 engine. That was a lot worse, although somehow that's like the most reliable engine on earth. It boggles the mind, doesn't it? All right, let's keep going. We can't tear the oil pan off because the oil pan, unfortunately, is integral to the block, and the engine stand is mounted on the oil pan. So we won't be tearing that off easily. Let's keep going on the top of this thing and getting the chains and the cams out.
Established as the determined leader, not the follower, of developments in Guatemala. Lewis wrote.
The upper coolant Y is off. Now it's time to pop off the oil heat exchanger here. Wow, that came off easier than I expected. Ah, it's just a straight up block. Look at that. Look at that. Full of coolant still. But yeah, this is it's a solid block with a coolant in, coolant out into the engine where you can see into the heat exchanger. And then oil, well, oil's on one side. I don't know which side the oil's on, honestly. It's kind of tough to tell. It looks like oil's right here and right here. It is. And coolant is right here and right here. So there you have it. That is the oil cooler. And now we can see the crank. That's kind of interesting. So oil cooler is the valley cover. Yeah, now it all makes sense. We can see everything about how it works. Of course, you might have seen that there's a 10 mil head bolt right in here underneath the oil filter housing, right? Oil filter housing had 3 bolts inside it. Once you pull the filter, super easy to get out. This looks like a much better job than it would be on all the BMWs where this gasket fails. And this one hadn't even failed. So there's something to be said about that, right? If it was a BMW, it would have been leaking there. But on this one, no such luck. Jag's holding up really well on the oil leak side. Now, all the rest of the head bolts are underneath the cams. So the cams have to come out, which is the next thing we have to attack right now. I think we've got all this cleaned up except for the timing chains of the cams, so let's yank them out of here. So these chains are also beautiful. I love the nice big marks on them. Tensioners still have pressure, even without the oil. Oh, look at the sludge coming out of there. Whew. Looks like pudding coming out of the tensioners. Here goes the next one. Okay, maybe. More pudding. All right, everything else in here looks like it's a 10, so that should all come out pretty easily. Let's pull all the guys. Balance. Ooh, look at that roller bearing. She's pretty. All right, and then there's a bearing on a bearing. Oh no, it's 2 bearings. 2-piece bearing on that little balance gear. And another one of these. And we should have all of our guides out of the way. So with that said, can we get the chains off? Guess I have to pull this one. There we go, that's better. So with these all pushed back, I assume we can make this happen. Got a little shim right there. We've got the big guys here on the chains that need to come out. Just 2 bolts there. And now everything should be loose enough to drop off of here. So if we can pull this off, I was hoping the chains would just come right off, but you know they don't want to. That's never the case. I think we're gonna cheat a bit here and take the timing rings off of the cams so that we can slide them out. Hey, cams are out. That made everything easy. All right, so there's one cam. Take a look at that. She looks rough. Which one is that? Intake, passenger. Ooh, this one doesn't want to come out. What's going on here? How are the cams stuck in their bearings? Rust. It was the rust. All right, there's the rest of the passenger side. Chains free. Those are fine, we don't even need to look at them. Guides, looking good. I think this thing had 30,000 miles on it, so they better look brand new. Everything's forward. You would kind of expect a brand new engine like this to not have real problems. Here's exhaust on the driver's side, which almost looks good, except for the little, it was also hanging out in a lake. A little bit of scoring there too. Not real scoring, it was just 2 tiny marks. So nothing, no big deal or anything. And of course, the final cam coming out, the most barnacled and water damaged of all. This one spent quite a bit of time underwater. And that is all 4 cams and the chains that we needed to get out of here. Another guide that looks pretty good. Another guide that looks good. No damage on the guides. It's got some additional little T30 bolts that help hold the head on out here in the weaker areas around the timing set. And then underneath this, there are some monster Torx, huge Torx bolts under the heads here. Let's take a look at those right now. Before we do that, since we're still sitting here, here's the oil squirter manifold. Pretty cool. Very, very tiny and precise, which is pretty cool to see for sure. Oh, the tube king. That's everything we need for this tube. It's got a nice O-ring seal on it down there. Quick look inside the head here. You can see the rust and jello inside there. You can see those gigantic Torx deep down inside the well here. And of course, everything else is coming right apart. It was really just the cams that were stuck. Look at those valve springs and valves. That's so cool the way they're in there. The keepers are way down low, which is kind of interesting. I kind of want to give them a tap. Ah, the valves are stuck. I don't think, there we go, that one's moving. All right, with that said, we don't even need to take these out. I'm not gonna tear the valves out of the head because we don't have the tool for this. It's very different than any of the domestic tools that you'd use to pull valve keepers and valve springs out. And the springs are buried all the way inside the head, right? The spring is all the way down underneath here and kind of half of the valve. So usually you see the keepers up towards the end of it, but these are mid-valve stem keepers. Also interesting. Really all we can do here is yank this thing apart. So we got some bolts way out here. We have to come off, and then everything else is a giant Torx bolt we have to remove. We'll grab our 2 auxiliary bolts back here on the head. I'm sure they just tossed those on for stability. And now the Torx are T60s. They are monsters. So let's get the big impact out and get to work. Well, apparently it wants to stay behind. Oh! Let's take a look at one of these head bolts. Wow, those are long. Those are nearly a foot long. And they sure don't want to come off every single time. All right, it should be off. Let's see what happens. I think I got every bolt. There was one bolt left. Just a 10 though. That's what it took. What are we looking at? You guys get to see it first. Oh, wow. Open deck block. I'm a little surprised. All right. Head gasket. Looks absolutely terrible. It's MLS, which is cool. Inside the head, looking like some barnacles. And let's get this thing out of here. There's really not much else to see on the head. It's not in as bad a shape as you would expect. Look inside the cylinders. No wonders it wasn't gonna move. That's what you would call a lot of water, and that's what you would call frozen solid. Whew. I almost thought about sending this out to have it rebuilt, since I need another one of these engines for the Land Rover that's sitting outside. And now I'm glad that I didn't even think about that, because there's no saving these cylinder bores. They've just had too much damage. They even had a spider living in them, apparently. So, open deck, which is cool. A lot of cooling around these cylinders. So with that said, I gotta flip this engine over, which is gonna make a very big mess, and then we'll pull this other head. And after that, we're basically all the way down. We just need to get the oil pan off, which is the tricky part, like I said, because the oil pan is part of its mounting setup for the trans. It's part of the bell housing. So if you have this thing on an engine stand and you didn't go with the highest pick points, which I didn't because I wanted it to be balanced, it makes it really hard to get the pan off. I think the solution to the pan is where you bring the forklift back in here, flip the engine over, and then rip it off. That's the easiest way to turn this engine over. We'll just take it off the engine stand. Timing drive must be keyed. Ah, yeah, there's the key. It's got a nice big keyway on it there. And then this must drive, you know, oil pump and all that fun stuff. So that's normally what the final chain does. You can now see the last oil squirter with everything else unpacked. Unbaking the cake here. And that tensioner, if we just pull this tensioner back, we can drop the chain off. I don't know if you can do it one-handed, but I'm certainly gonna try. Oh. Well, we got it turned over and dumped out the sludgy gunk that was collecting in here. So much water. A bunch of this water is mixed with coolant too. I know because it bounced out of the oil pan and I got to taste it. I'm probably covered in oil now. So let's get this head off of here. I think we've actually got all the bolts out this time except for the big ones. And see what this bank looks like. Maybe it's better, maybe it's worse. Tough to be worse than that because things are growing inside that one. But let's go. All right, No spare bolts left in this one, I hope. Let's hit it. How's it look? This one was growing some stuff in there, full of water. Again, ooh, wow. I've never seen a cylinder this damaged. So this one's got some buildup, right? The buildup moves, but look at this. Full on thick growth. This looks like that Dacia we just tore down at Rich's. This one is obliterated. Let's do a little scraping here. Here's our exploratory tool. Yeah, that's not coming back. Never seen the insane amount of rust we have right there. She's done. She's dead, Jim. Look at that. These even have noise covers on them. This is actually super nice to help shut up the DI pumps, and I bet also putting them down low like this helped keep them quiet, at least away from out of earshot. That's kind of what you're hoping for, is to put the pumps down here where the rotating assembly is, where hopefully like a lot of the noise is. And I'm sure that helps them manage that clickety-clackety noise when they want like a nice V8 sounding rumble, V6 rumble out of this one, I guess. But yeah, I guess if you bury these pumps, it probably really helps out in the end with your NVH. While we're down here, let's pull the oil level sensor, the lower pan, and those pumps off. It looks like they're all T30. So this is the quick part. A lot of water in there. A lot of the sludge. At least the gasoline smells nice compared to this coolant water mixture. Got the same little lifter caps on them that ride on the spring to be driven off of this balance shaft, which is, we're calling it a balance shaft. It could just be an auxiliary shaft, but I think it's in there for balance. Look at the sludge. Wow, built up. But that's your oil level sender, runs way up inside the pan. Time for the lower pan to come off. It is RTV'd on, so. I wasn't planning on ruining my floor like that, but wow. There's the oil pump right here. Look at that jello. Looks like vanilla pudding. Look at that. And this thing was full of water, full of water. You guys saw how much drained out when we opened up the drain plug there. You guys think it'll turn over yet? Let's put the crank bolt back in. Actually, let's pull the rest of the timing gears off. Throw those away. Got to remember to screw the crank bolt in backwards. No, I'm gonna say that this engine is locked up solid because the impact was doing a little work right there. It didn't move one bit. So like I said, it's forklift time. First, before I can get the forklift back in here, I gotta go throw all this trash in the iron trailer. I'd love to have a before and after with all this stacked up on the ground. It always looks really cool with this big pile of carnage, especially with all the rust that came out of this engine and water. But for now, let's go trash all this, and then I can drive the forklift back in here and we can flip this thing all the way over. We've got what's left of this engine out here on the forklift, which makes a great workbench. So we're just gonna do all the rest of this on here because all we have to do is pull off a million 10mm bolts that hold the oil pan on, the upper oil pan here. So let me get the engine stand unhooked because that's obviously holding these two together, and then we'll start ripping out the tins. Well, there must be a couple dowel pins right here and right here because the oil pan is separated. As you guys can see, there's a huge gap over here, but down there it will not come apart. So I took some knocker loose, sprayed her in both corners, and I'm hoping that this thing wiggles off, but I think the move might be to use the air hammer with a chisel on it as a wedge and let that pry this thing apart, because there's no fasteners in it and it will not come out. All I know is there must be a couple hidden fasteners behind the flywheel because this is impossible and it doesn't make any sense. Like, we snapped the cast oil pan there out on the flange and it didn't come off. So we've got our E14 E-Torx here, which isn't going to be enough of an impact. So let me get an adapter on this and then we should be able to get this flywheel off, because somehow this isn't enough, which I guess if I lose the extension, we might get it. There we go. Flywheel removed. Honestly, runnable. Oh, the tone ring is attached to it. That's interesting. It looked like it was two separate rings because, oh, they're riveted together. They are two separate rings, but they're riveted or spot welded together. Kind of interesting there. And now, these little 8s on this rear crank seal cover interface with the oil pan. That doesn't make any sense, but I guess. But let's zip those out with an 8 real quick, and then hopefully this thing just splits right in half. There's the one that was holding it. You can see all the pressure relief. There goes the air hammer. The pan is free. And let's get this cover off. I will give them one little bit of credit here. The thing that's nice about this is you don't have to drive a seal in, you just replace this entire plate. So that is much preferable to an LS where you have to drive in the seal and hope you got it right if you don't have the special tool. But hey, the pan is off. Let's see what we're working with. Ooh, it's mostly all oil pump. Not too much carnage in the bottom here. A little bit of wet, rusty spots, but hey, it is aluminum, so it did a great job resisting corrosion. And now we're back to a lot of tins and a bunch of T30s that need to come out. Check this out. It doesn't really have balanced shafts. We've got the timing chain. Obviously, it's not really a timing chain, but the auxiliary chain runs down to the oil pump here and then runs this shaft that picks up the vacuum pump and the 2 DI pumps. But it's not very balancy like a Porsche engine or anything like that. But there are balancers all over. Here's a balancer. Anti-harmonic balancer here on the back, kind of. This is pretty wild. This thing sure worked great. I loved it once I got the other engine, and once it cost me almost $14,000 of parts or something like that on a car I paid $14,000 for, I liked it again. It was great. I think that's what the kids call cope, but there's the aux chain. Throw it in our parts pile here, and let's yank all these bolts. There's all the tins. Another oil squirter here on the front with a little oil deflector in there, which is kind of cool. And let's get the oil pickup. What is this? Oh, this is the feed into the middle of the crank or something. Interesting. Check it out. So here's the oil pickup. It's also huge. Think of the volume this almost 1-inch diameter tube can move. It must be absolutely massive. O-ring sealed in there. She's huge. So let's throw this over in our pan. And then you also have this giant oil feed right here that goes into the block. And then there must be oil galleys that feed into the crank and everything else on this engine, because everything on here is getting oiled, which is honestly kind of cool. Oop, I missed a middle row of pins here. But the oil pump should be free, other than this O-ring tube here. Yeah. Oil pump pumps. Feels great. Jag Land Rover logo's on that. It's the first part on the engine without a Ford logo on it. And that should release everything on the bottom of this engine here. The only thing that's tricky about this is whatever holds this. Oh, you gotta pull this cover. Ah! Once the rear seal cover's off, you can get to the last T30 here. And once that's off, you can drop everything off the engine. Woo! It's a puzzle. Puzzle for adults. Oh, come on. There's our like crank and head oiling supply there, which is very interesting. Yeah, this feeds all over the place, that's for sure. And let's see our little shaft. Runs so nice. I feel bad throwing this stuff away, guys. But this one, it was unrecoverable, that's for sure. The crank! That's beautiful. It's all laser engraved with the new Jag Land Rover logo. Woo! Well guys, I think that's it for the Jag engine. I know it's not even because it's raining, it's actually super nice outside. The reason is because the tool for this, I don't know what it is. So I just tried my T50 and T55s, and T50 doesn't fit and T55 is too big. And if you look at this fastener, it's like 100% squared off, unlike Torx that has rounded edges on it, right? Your Torx fastener has some nice rounded sections. This has like a super positive engagement there, and it's all squared off. And it's the same fastener on all of these. So basically everything left in this engine is this weird fastener that I can't take off. I had already taken everything else out, and I thought we were there. I thought we were home free, throw the impact on it, but we were not. This thing, it's also locked up solid. I got the big impact out again and beat on it, and it will not turn. Totally seized. We could obviously pull all the tins on the connecting rods and punch the pistons out, but I don't even think they're gonna come out. I think we have to call this engine right here. That is the 3-liter Jag AJ, all the way down to the rotating assembly. And it really doesn't look that bad. You can also see the oil squirters if it focuses down there, where that little button head 30 is, T30. Oil squirters going everywhere in this thing. There's balance shafts right there. And yeah, you can see they actually squirt more of up at the crank than anything. So, oh, no, they also squirt down into the pistons. Okay, so it's this back galley where normally they'd have oil squirters going into the pistons, like this one. You can see that little wire down underneath the connecting rod. That's the oil squirter that's blowing right into the bottom of the piston where it's reinforced. And I'm sure that cools the skirts. But look at, there's a hole in the block too. No, these are supposed to be there. I know, you can see daylight through it, but okay, the hole in the block must be like a oil or air passage there. Some kind of windage action. It's kind of cool. The oil pump is the windage tray on this as well. But hey, what a cool engine. I hope you guys never have to replace one because it's very expensive. And with that said, I'm gonna go dump this thing in the iron trailer, and that will be the end of this one. And then I get to do it again when we drag this Land Rover out that's behind the iron trailer. Hopefully it's not as bad as this one. I think it's probably safe because it's been under a hood. That's something. That is it for today, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to head on over to shop WatchJRGo.com for cool shirts just like this. And please like, share, subscribe, do whatever you want to do, and I will talk to you next time. Guys, I told you I had a surprise that was going at the end of this video, and then we forgot to shoot it, but Mike was here for the surprise. What happened is I listed that supercharger for sale from the AJ, and somebody reached out to me and said, do you want to do some trading for a Game Gear? And I was like, done. Immediately, no question. I've always wanted a Sega Game Gear, and I have some games for it, but I've never owned a Game Gear. So I've been adding to the collection for that. now I've got one, and I was planning on showing you guys that Game Gear because it does work. And not only, you know, Mike grabbed it when it showed up for me. You said it had no batteries in it, remember?
No batteries, but it came with games.
Guess what was in the front?
Batteries.
The factory rechargeable battery that plugs into it. It like screws onto the back.
Okay.
And it all works. It definitely works. I played Sonic on it. The screen does need recaps, unfortunately, but what a great trade. I was about to throw all of it in the Iron trailer, and I figured somebody would want an Eaton Supercharger. Turn it into a Game Gear.
It's a good trade.
I thought so. I was thrilled.